Welcome to the Wordy Pair Podcast, your go-to hub for all things writing, world building, and the occasional dive into the weird and wonderful world of fiction. We're breaking down the barriers between you and your next great story. Whether you're a seasoned scribe or just scribbling your first sentences, we've got something for you. We'll be discussing everything from crafting compelling characters to dissecting the good, the bad, and the downright bizarre in the world of fiction. Okay, this script says you guys are eccentric. Isn't that just a 3-syllable word for weird? No offense. So, whether you're in need of inspiration, a good laugh, or just a couple of weirdos to keep you company on your writing journey, you're in the right place. Thanks for tuning in to the Wordy Pair Podcast.
Hello and welcome everybody to the Wordy Pair Podcast. As always, I'm Rudy.
And I am Justin.
Sleepy Justin.
Very much so.
And we are talking to you about bookstores, or something that is specifically happening in bookstores. I must admit I'm a little bit blind on this one. Justin suggested the topic, and
this isn't a topic.
We're going to see how this goes.
This might turn into a full-on rant.
I'm all right with that. Rants get lots of hits.
Yeah, I discovered that there's a chain of bookstores called Books A Million. I don't know how extensive
I've heard of them,
they are, but
I don't think I've ever been in one, but I've heard of them.
I like them. I found one a couple of years ago, and I was like, oh, this is kind of like the old Borders, which they're not anymore. They're not quite like Borders anymore, but the one that I initially found, you know, they had like the lounge chairs and the big bookcases that you basically needed a ladder to get to the top shelf. It had a nice look to it and everything.
Sure.
This particular one that I went to yesterday, it's still a pretty nice place. Again, it fell into the whole Barnes & Noble thing of we have to be half a toy store in order to make money.
Yeah.
There's definitely a widespread manga influence.
Well, that's pretty common in bookstores.
Yeah,
those are at least
that's
books.
acceptable though, because they're basically books. Comic books in a bookstore is acceptable to me, especially mangas like graphic novel size. It may as well be a book, kitty little picture book, but sometimes for adults.
Right.
So, they've got a nice setup inside. I like their structure better than Barnes & Noble just because they don't have, say, the mystery section cut in half by a romance section.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, everything was where it should be. If they had a section that had science fiction, that was the section. It was a little weird that science fiction and fantasy hit. I mean, I'm not sure just how bad science fiction and fantasy has gotten to where the smallest section of the store is the combination of science fiction and fantasy, which is just enough shelves to fill one wall in, like, the smallest wall on my bedroom.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at all these books, like science fiction and fantasy used to be like what people would go to. Like where's the people that want action and adventure and the really creative stuff? Because regular old fiction is you might have to be creative to write it, but you don't have to think of anything beyond what's human.
Sure.
And I always felt like everyone to some degree there's a bit of appeal to the strange and the unreal.
Right.
And that doesn't seem to be reflected in what I'm seeing in bookstores, where the largest sections are romance and there was an entire section of just like Bibles and Christian literature that was bigger than the science fiction and fantasy section, and the Bible portion just by itself was almost more than half of the whole sci-fi section. So it's just like, wow, that's just Bibles.
Actually pretty impressive. Well, normally there's a good shelf or two of religious books and religious interpretation books. So that's it. I mean, it doesn't seem like those have like expanded, but it seems like science fiction and fantasy is just contracted.
Well, I suspect, just based off of the much bigger presence of like an entire 3 shelves of just different types of Bibles, like kids' picture book Bibles and
Sure.
all sorts of different editions. Most places don't carry that much, so it's possible that Books A Million is kind of like the Christian bookstore of non-Christian bookstores. Like maybe they're owned by someone who's
Maybe,
I want a lot of
maybe they're owned
Bibles
by
in my-"
like Hobby Lobby or something.
God, I hope not. We'll have a prayer session in the middle of the store to hope that they're not owned by Hobby Lobby. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the bookstore itself is nice. I think it's set up better than Barnes and Noble. I think they have they sell better things. Like Barnes and Noble does have their toy section and their little like they've got the anime stuff and the board games and everything.
Well,
this place...
hold on a minute. Barnes and Noble stores are usually pretty freaking huge. Is the Books A Million store the same size as the Barnes & Noble, or is it smaller in general?
It's smaller, but not really that much. I mean, it's a fairly decent-sized bookstore. There's a lot of floor space there, and they're not really filling... They're using a lot of the area. So, you're not going to walk 5 feet without running into a shelf with something.
Okay, fair enough.
So they cram a good amount into a small store, and they sell the same stuff, essentially, with... maybe the exception of I don't remember if I saw DVDs there.
Okay.
But it might have been like one of the standing shelves that I didn't in an aisle I didn't walk down.
Sure, that's a possibility. Especially if the things are dense enough, you could go by it without noticing. Well, maybe. But if you didn't see the DVDs, they're probably not DVDs anymore. It's probably their Blu-ray discs. But I mean, even Best Buy doesn't have them anymore, so.
They don't have
Maybe
that.
they got rid of them.
Yeah. They don't have that many at Barnes and Noble either, so it's possible. I know they sold records and they sold record players because gotta have the vinyl these days, I guess.
Yeah.
But it wasn't so much the store itself that I have anything to rant about. Is kind of where I'm heading with this.
Okay.
It was the looking at books and what I was discovering about modern printing that was driving me up a wall.
Modern printing, huh? Interesting.
Yeah.
Now you've mentioned this before, but just for the audience, in case anybody happens to be listening to this for the first time and hasn't picked up any of our previous episodes, you worked at a printing press company for quite a while, yeah?
Well, not quite a while. It wasn't.
A few years, right?
I think that was 3 or 4 years.
Okay, that's enough to get a feel for the industry, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And, you saw bad things happen and good things happen, and you dealt with a lot of big machines printing books, and you have a decent amount of knowledge as to how printing worked, not very long ago, too. I mean, like, you had this job when? In the mid-2000s?
Yeah, sometime around then. 2007-ish?
Okay. So you're a fairly good... I wouldn't necessarily say expert, but I'd say you're a fairly well-informed source for opinions about printing quality, is what I'm trying to establish.
I'd say that's fair. I mean, anyone could do it with, a couple of weeks of looking at books and thinking about it, but I have used the machinery, so...
But you actually are familiar with how the machines work, and you're familiar with the kinds of mistakes that are likely to happen in a printing situation. So, okay, with that said, with that preamble, you observed things about the printing of current and modern books.
I'm glad you prefaced it with all of that, because almost everything that would apply there doesn't matter for the observation that I'm going to give you first.
Oh, fantastic. I'm glad to have wasted everyone's time.
I mean, it might be relevant a little bit, but let's see. Let's dig into it. So I'm going to look at the biggest thing that really, stuck out and made me kind of want to find someone to secretly punch down a dark alleyway without anyone seeing, and then maybe, hiding the unconscious body and
hitting it with an iron rod.
Yeah, repeatedly. Maybe just the legs though. We definitely advocate violence here. We do not advocate the murdering of people who print books.
Sure.
Often. So Uh, I'm looking at the Terry Pratchett books because there's still a couple I don't have.
Okay,
And
cool.
I prefer to get them in paper, in hardcover, because they're the only books that, well, like if I had to get rid of every book in my collection except for like one author, of course it would be Terry Pratchett. I'd get rid of everything else in a heartbeat before I got rid of
Sure.
my Pratchett books. They didn't have any hardcover books, and they had the paperbacks that I remember they changed the covers for the Terry Pratchett books something like 20 years ago, possibly more,
Okay.
to much more simplistic covers from the original Paul Kidby.
I've seen comparison pictures of this where the old ones are beautiful, detailed fantasy landscapes and characters in appearance, and the new ones are like an object and some typography.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they still had those covers, which
Okay.
isn't my complaint here, because it's expected at this point.
I mean, all the old covers are probably out of print,
yeah, and
and
there's
probably the hard covers are all out of print for Pratchett at this point.
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's still a few. I actually saw 2 hardcover books that were collections of his short stories that hadn't been published before,
Okay.
but I was more interested in getting his full-length novel. So I'm looking at the books, and it jumped out to me that some of the books were sticking out further on the rack than other ones.
Okay.
And the entire world has gone to these weird print sizes that I just don't understand in terms of books. Like the original paperback novel size that we were all getting for the longest time.
Yeah.
Like I think it's fair to say you've been around long enough. Like you remember in the 80s and 90s, books basically came in one print size with, there were other print sizes,
paperbacks.
but
The whole, my whole paperback Nero Wolfe collection is this size. Almost my entire Raymond Feist collection is this size. I think my copies of I have like what's his name? The guy that did Gust Front.
John Ringo?
Yeah, John Ringo. I have some John Ringo books that are that size. It was a pretty standard size. I mean, I could get up and make a big show of going and get a measuring tape in one of those books and telling you how big it is, but it's about half of an A4. Little less than that.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm looking at the Terry Pratchett books. Now, of course, the newer covers, like there were some later books that Terry Pratchett printed that did come out in different print sizes that had actually better cover art than the 2000 to 2020 run.
Okay.
Like I've got a copy of Thud and what's the other one? Raising Steam. They actually have like character art on them, which was something that was taken away from the older books.
Okay, decent quality character art.
Yeah, pretty decent. I mean, it's definitely not anywhere near Paul Kidby, but it's way better than anything I've got on my books.
So you're familiar with the name Paul Kidby, but I'm not, and the audience might not be. So can you tell us a little bit more about him?
I can't tell you too much other than he was an artist that worked with Terry Pratchett to do almost all of Terry Pratchett's early covers, and he actually.
When you say early, how far forward are we talking?
His first Discworld books, like Color of Magic, The Light Fantastic, Mort, Sorcery, Moving Pictures. I don't really know what the cutoff date was. I'm pretty sure he did Guards. Okay. And he continued to do work after that. Like, I actually have right in front of me.
Yes, most artists do.
Yeah, well, I mean, Terry Pratchett's Discworld work, he continued.
I'm kidding, but yes.
I have in front of me 2 tall hardcover editions that are
okay.
Terry Pratchett's The Last Hero, which as far as I know was never published as a straight-up paperback. It was originally published as an illustrated book with Paul Kidby's art on almost every page, full color. And the story is kind of written like a magazine print.
Yeah.
And then there's the art of Discworld. That's all Paul Kidby art, front to back. And he's basically synonymous with Terry Pratchett's Discworld.
So he worked with Pratchett for many years.
Yeah. I mean, I think The Last Hero came out in the mid 2000s.
Okay, and Pratchett had been publishing regularly since like the 70s or something, right? Yeah, 70s. Okay, yeah. So we're talking 30 years of history there, maybe more.
Yeah. So that's that's a long run to work with a single artist, and I think it worked out well because I really, when I look at the hardcovers I want to buy, I've got a bunch of the ones that don't really have stupendous art on them.
Yeah.
But the ones that I really want are those early ones. I've only got 2 of them, I think.
Okay.
And I mean, I got my favorite one. The Light Fantastic probably has my favorite Paul Kidby cover art for a Terry Pratchett book. It's definitely worth looking up if you want to get a good Rincewind picture. But
nice.
These books in the stores, it's like you can kind of tell where the different generations were. But what really was weird, were the original paperbacks with the bland covers. Now I'm pretty sure they were all published by, was it HarperCollins?
Okay.
It's on the top of the books. I don't have any of them in front of me, but let's say it's HarperCollins. Yeah, let's say it's them.
Oh,
and
man.
it's the same art.
Yeah.
And they're the paperback editions that they publish. So I pull them off the shelf, and I'm looking at it thinking that there's got to be something wrong with my eyes. And I'm like, okay, even if there's something wrong with my eyes, there's nothing wrong with my hands here. This book is almost an inch shorter width-wise than a normal paperback book.
Oh.
And I open it up and I'm like, are they printing books to try and mimic cell phone sizes at this point?
Oh no. Oh my goodness, no.
It was almost cell phone size, like giant rectangle reading from top to bottom, and I'm just like, but it's HarperCollins. Like, do they not have their own printing company that they go to anymore? Do they not have maybe they don't have their own printing press itself, but I mean, I would assume that they've been contracting to the same people for years. Did they move
they almost
production?
certainly have their own facilities.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if, like, did they move production for this overseas and they just use whatever size they have overseas? And I'm guessing like one of two things has to.
The thing about dealing with like with businesses overseas is that they usually give you more options. They're like, oh, do you want it in 6x4 or 7x5 or you know what I mean? Like, because they just have a giant factory. They're just like, yeah, whatever. We'll print out whatever you want. That's kind of how they. That's how they get market share, is by being flexible. Like, I would imagine that someone like that, a company like HarperCollins already has facilities somewhere, in like, the US or the UK where they print these things out.
I mean, even so, they're printing
I imagine it
books.
being a conscious choice, I guess, to go with this more tall rectangular shape.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I can't imagine what brought that choice about. Like, on the one hand, okay, so theorizing. Possibly they're like, oh, people read things on cell phones now. Let's just print things cell phone size. That sounds silly to me. I don't know if that sounds silly to you, but it sounds silly to me.
It sounds like something that would be worth trying to see if it has an effect.
But if that was the case, I mean, there were newer books that were printed like that, but not too many. It was largely the older sci-fi novels that I kept pulling books off the shelf, and it's like, this is really thin. And is it maybe a case of it's cheaper to print for some reason? I'm trying to figure out how it would be cheaper in that sense, because you already have to go through the trouble of... No, I would imagine
not. I mean, cutting paper to a specific size is usually not like that's not usually the cost limiting factor in a large printing job, right? It's the size of the paper itself that usually is, and the number of pages and the, if there's extra goodies like special typefaces and stuff, right? Like I would imagine that in at least a traditional printing press system, that the crazier you go with that, the more expensive it gets, because the longer it takes to typeset properly.
Yeah. So
nowadays they're probably doing everything digitally, so maybe it's not that big of a deal anymore. But at the same time, I would imagine that doing something unusual would be the thing that generates costs for a printer at this point.
Well, my next thought on that was maybe it's a shipping thing. Like, did they work out the best box sizes to use, and so now they're trying to print things at a size that gives them maximum output for...
maybe. I mean, I kind of doubt it, because the thing is that the smaller you make any one of your dimensions, you lose a larger amount of space proportionally because of margins. Did the books have really, really narrow margins?
No, I mean, it honestly, it was creeping really close to just cell phone with text on the page. It was almost there. Like if I'd have held my phone up to the book, the text might have just barely been past the edges of my phone.
Let me throw this idea at you. Okay, when I was in school, they taught us that like the way that the thing that slows you down the most in reading is moving your eyes from side to side on a single line, and that the idea is to try to pick up a larger fraction of the page per eye movement than you did before to read faster, in the sense that, like, if you can read a page with 2 eye movements as opposed to 3 eye movements, you'll spend less time moving your eyes and more time actually reading. So maybe if they make the book narrower, it makes it easier for people to read it faster?
There's a possibility that someone was considering that, but then I would have to ask the question, why isn't every HarperCollins book on the shelf leaning towards that? And furthermore, why would they then not print these slightly wider books and just do what the Japanese do, where you have multiple columns per page? Because you can print a wider book. Like they had a lot of hardcovers and even softcover, like the wider softcovers, kind of. What's a good example? I don't know of any books that you might have that, but let's say slightly less wide than your Atelier Rorona special edition art book that for PS3. You still have that?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so maybe a little less wide than that, and then you do 2 columns of text at a smaller font size.
I think the average reader is turned off by multiple columns on the same page.
Well, you know my thoughts on the average reader, but
well, but the average reader is who they have to serve.
Yeah, no, it is possible that maybe someone somewhere is thinking that. I think it's very likely
that it's the fact that cell phones are a particular width. It might be something even more one-off than that, like pockets on clothing are approaching a certain width because these
books are, because they had to make the books taller to accommodate the text.
Sure, but then you have the what would you call it, the bragging rights to have a book sticking out of your pocket instead of your phone.
Do people do that?
People brag about everything. We did a whole episode on it. Yeah,
but I mean, there's a limit, man.
I know, right? But we may have found the margin of it.
I used to carry my my paperbacks in my winter coat pockets because they were available and easy to read.
Yeah.
And so I could just carry them around and sit down, like if I had a doctor's appointment or something, and pull them out of my pocket and read. But I can't imagine that people are getting wider, like, breast pockets and sticking giant paperbacks in them. And
narrower pockets. Narrower pockets.
No, well, with a breast pocket, you'd have to have a wider pocket even for these narrower books.
Well, I don't think anyone's putting a book in their breast pocket, because those don't usually have a capacity for something thick. But I'm thinking of, like, pants pockets or...
even these books aren't fitting into pants pockets.
Okay, fair enough.
You may as well buy...
my phone fits in a pants pocket, so...
Let's get distracted here for a minute. There's actually a product on the market. I believe it's about $269. Looks kind of cool. I've only heard good things about it. It's called the... I can't remember the brand, but it's called a Books. And it's... Son of a gun. What was the brand?
We don't care about the brand. It's fine.
Yeah, well, anyway, it's an e-ink reader, and it's phone shaped. Yeah. It's cell phone sized. Okay. And it's according to everyone that I've seen review it, it's a nice little pocket way of carrying all your Kindle and Nook and whatever have you books around. I guess it runs on Android, similar to like the Pocketbook brand or
sure.
anything. So you can put basically all of the apps on it, but it's a good e-ink screen to read on. And a couple of people that I watched reviews for said it's actually their favorite reader just because of the form factor. So maybe there is something to people wanting to read at that size. I would
easier
push
to hold
back.
In your hand, maybe?
Oh yeah. No, it's easy to. It's definitely a one-handed device. And I know a lot of people that like the e-ink readers. Some of them like to have the buttons that can flip between pages. This one does not have the buttons, but it's also much smaller, so it's easier to do with one hand anyway.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is a trend that we're just unaware of, right? Like, it could be that because when I read my paperbacks, they are kind of two-hand jobs to read them, and so if you could make them into a one-hand job, Maybe
Haha.
ha ha ha, very funny. But no, but seriously, like maybe people are reading on the go more often, and so they want something that they can just kind of pull out with one hand and from their pocket and look at, and then not have to worry about, like, taking whatever is in their other hand, putting that somewhere else.
Well, I'm
I'm speculating. Sure.
Well, yeah, of course, but that's all we're doing here is speculating. I mean, I'm questioning just how, like, how little of a width can you have before it actually becomes harder to read, considering eye movement? Because it seems to me the original old-fashioned paperback novel size
Yeah.
had to be pretty close to perfect. I tried reading a couple of pages on the skinnier one, and it wasn't really a problem, but I didn't feel like I was reading any faster. And on top of
Mhm.
that, you get to a certain point, like try writing 3 paragraphs, 2 words each line, and
Yeah.
just running down the center of a page, and it actually gets harder to read once you start getting too skinny, because you're wasting eye movement jumping down and trying to connect words that there's a certain length.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So
Yeah.
you're saying that
There's a
at
length of
certain
phrase that your brain
Yeah.
has to have to predict the incoming text, which is, how you.
I was thinking also that the shorter, or at least the narrower the pages, the greater proportion of hyphenated words at the ends of lines you're going to have to worry about.
It could be that too, but I was thinking more in terms of just, like, neurologically speaking,
Yeah.
the predictive patterns that your brain looks for to try and figure out what's going to be said when you're reading. That's where your ability to read fast comes from. It's not reading every word as fast as possible. It's how fast your brain can predict what's being said. So the more you shorten it, like you have once upon a time, you know what that means. You take
Yeah.
time away from that and put it on the next line. You have once upon a. You can pretty much tell that time is going to be the next word and gloss over it. You get down to once upon, and then it's like, well, it could be once upon a midnight dreary. And then you get to once, and it's, the shorter you get, the less your brain can handle that without skipping ahead to the next line.
Well, I mean, I think that the average person probably reads a certain. I mean, maybe they've done some research and they've discovered that, like, the average person can read in a single line, x number of characters, or x distance, with how far they usually hold the book from their face and stuff like that. And maybe they're like, well, at this width, a person can read a full line, without moving their eyes left to right, and so it reduces eye strain by only having to move your eyes up and down instead of constantly rastering back and forth.
I don't disagree with you there. The only pushback I'd give to that is just anecdotally speaking. I had that. I have read a lot of books on my phone. I used to have that BlackBerry Passport phone that was a wider screen, and I felt like I could read my books more comfortably and faster on that than on modern cell phones.
Well, that's fair. That's fair.
But, I mean, I'm just one case scenario. You
Right.
do it over multiple people, and maybe there's a bigger difference.
Yeah, it could be that like modern. I mean, I think that your hypothesis, your cell phone hypothesis, is probably the most correct of all the different things we speculated about. Like, because
It
cell
just makes
phones
me wonder why more books wouldn't be printed like that, because this is old Terry Pratchett books that are being reprinted like
well,
this.
they might have been printed more recently, right?
Oh, maybe.
The older books might have been printed last year, and the books that are on the shelf, maybe they were printed 2 or 3 years ago.
And, to be fair, I'm not sure how many things on that shelf were HarperCollins, but there's definitely
True.
something to be said about the multiple size formats that books come in now. I also wonder how much influence manga had on that. Where did it...
Yeah.
Because books definitely got wider. Like, my copy of Raising Steam by Terry Pratchett is manga-sized. And
Okay.
I'm wondering if, with the popularity of manga, did that become a standard size that they started to try to use for print books as well?
It's funny you should say that, because I have a bunch of manga books and I have a bunch of light novels of the same thing, right? So I have how a bunch of series are usually light
Oh,
novels.
yeah,
they
and
also
those
have
are
a
different
manga version.
sizes.
Those are different sizes. So that doesn't seem like that could possibly be the answer. But
Yeah, because it seems like at the very least the same in-house brand would be printing the same size books if that was the case.
Right, but they don't.
And then, I mean, don't even get me started. I really have to go back and figure out how to do a better print version of my own books, just because. Well, I handed you a few copies recently. You saw the size issue there.
Well, yeah.
There's like the hardcover edition is the size of a math textbook.
Yes, it is.
And I need to print it at a smaller font so that I can. So Amazon. I was doing it through Amazon. Amazon will have a certain size that they can work with, and so if you're trying to print at a certain size, and they can't do that with how big the book is, they will send you a message saying, we cannot do this at this size. You need to choose a different size. And me, being the idiot that I am, I was like, okay, I guess I'll pick a bigger size. And I was like, this seems like it's going to be really big, which it was. And what I should have done is I should have put the font at a smaller size and then gotten smaller paperbacks and hardcovers out of it that way, which also would have made...
Possibly?
Well,
yeah,
I think the problem is... I need to do that, and this is just some advice for anyone else if you've written a large book, you're going to want to print your books if you're going through Amazon at a smaller font size, because if you don't, your books are going to be ludicrously expensive. Like even my paperback version of The Good Guy is $20 because I can't sell it any cheaper than that because of the size, because of how much paper and how much shipping it's going to cost for the book. Selling it and for anything less is I don't make any money. And as it is, I make like $1. So $20 to sell the book, I make $1 off of it. And then the hardcover is even worse. That's $30. And that's to make about $1 as well. And and that's not even with their international distribution setting. Once you do that, it becomes more expensive for them to distribute. And I would have to raise the price on both of those just to be able to even select that option, which I was like, okay, that'd be pushing it.
Yeah.
So I've got to go back, resize the font, make everything fit in a book of a smaller format, just so I can get the price down to something like $14.99, $12.99 for the paperback, and hopefully $17 to $19.99 for the hardcover. I mean, hardcovers are pushing $24.99 these days, and even the smaller print stuff that I was looking at the bookstores. Now the bookstores will be a little bit more expensive, especially if they're buying their books from Amazon.
Yeah.
But, smaller sized hardcover books, we're talking like what the old hardcovers were about, as tall as a math textbook, but not as wide.
Yeah.
We're talking a lot shorter, like an inch or two shorter than that is a normal hardcover these days. And those are $24.99, $29.99. So, if you want to get paperbacks out there, you really have to whittle down the size of the inside of the book any way you can. Not in terms of cutting things, but in terms of font size.
When you're working with it on Amazon, do you get to choose like your margins or anything like that? Do you have any leeway there, or is it basically here's what you get?
It's kind of here's what you get, but their margins aren't that bad. I've read a lot of Amazon bought books. I mean, you can look at my books that I gave you and see what their margins are. You pretty much don't mess with that. You can if you format your book as a PDF.
You know what? Let's do a little ASMR. I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna go over. I'm gonna grab the copies of your book, and I'm also gonna grab like one of my random Raymond Feist books, and I'll be right back.
All right. In the meantime, do you know what's really great? Coffee is really great. Coffee gets me through the day. I've always hated coffee. It's always been very bitter, and I drink my coffee black because I don't like the sugary coffees as much unless they're cold, in which case I get cold canned coffee, or I stop at a Tim Hortons. But let me tell you about getting through your day. Gotta be the coffee. Love the coffee. I'm running out of things to talk about. Are you back yet?
All right, you get to listen to me padding around in my house. Okay.
In his giant slippers.
No, I don't have slippers on because it's hot. So I'm
giant bunny slippers.
Giant puffy bunny, pink bunny slippers. I'm looking at The Good Guy, the hardcover version, and I'm looking at my copy of Magician Master, and I'm looking at the softcover Good Guy as well, because you gave me one of each. And I am noticing that your typeface is way bigger than the common humble paperback from,
Yes, I stupidly left it
yesteryear.
at 14-point font as Amazon recommended. Since it was my
Yeah.
first run with a print from Amazon, I was like, all right, I'll do what they say, and I was a fool for doing that.
Yeah, Amazon recommendations are usually not very good.
Well, it depends. I mean, I've gotten good. Okay, so let me tell you a story while we're distracted anyway.
Are we distracted anymore?
I'm always distracted.
Okay, fair.
You know me better than this. Come on. I bought a futon mattress recently. In fact, yesterday. And
Yeah.
I didn't want to spend a lot of money on it. So I found one that was it was like $200 some, and I was like, nah, I'm not going to do this because then I have to buy a mattress cover, and that's $40. And I scroll down a bit, and I'm like, oh, well, wait a minute, what's this? I clicked on a recommended one. It's like, oh, this is $180, and it still looks just as good. And the mattress cover, $49 again. Okay, well, that would save me a bit. I still don't want to spend over $200. I did this 4 times, and by the time I got to my last click-through, I found a very good mattress for $69 and a mattress cover for it for $29. And I have to say that Amazon really did their job there.
That's fair. That's fair.
I mean, I kept getting new suggestions for different types. And the only thing I'll say that's bad about that is that now I go on Amazon and that's all they want to show me is futon mattresses. Like their algorithm hasn't figured out that I don't need 5 of them yet.
You bought a futon mattress. That means that all you want are futon mattresses.
Oh, it was great. I went on Amazon to buy my mother a thing of perfume for Mother's Day one year. And for the next year and a half, all of my first selections every time I went on Amazon was like, here's women's shoes, here's dresses, here's purses. And so I made sure just to leave that up in case anyone was looking so they could be like, what's Justin buying here?
Yeah, I mean, if you cut your font size down from 14 to 12 or 11, you'd save a lot of space. I'm looking at the margins, and the margins are pretty darn narrow on the hardcover. As for the soft cover,
a little bit more on the soft cover, it looked like.
They're pretty similar, but the book itself is smaller, and so there's a larger proportion of the page.
I could definitely get those down to something closer to like one of the current Terry Pratchett book sizes.
Yeah.
Or I don't know. I'm trying to think of a book that everyone would know, but
I feel like one of these Raymond Feist novels is probably not like, it's not half. It's more than half of your book, I would imagine. But
like Brian Lumley has books that are larger than mine, and I've got one of his paperbacks, and it's printed at the original paperback size and just has a really big spine to it. I don't think Amazon will print quite that big a spine, but it should. I should be able to get pretty close to where I can get my paperbacks down to that size. And if not, there's like one size bigger. That's it looks like everyone uses the size that's one size bigger, to be honest. So maybe I'll just go with that.
Yeah,
because I do want to do it through Amazon as much as for starters. I'm kind of like 90% in on digital at this point. I love having paperback books to read, but I also love the e-ink readers, and I just think a lot of people are reading things digitally. I know that the very exclusive people on like when you're looking at Twitter and people are just like, I like my paperbacks. I'm like, okay, that's cool. I do too, but I don't think we're the majority.
Yeah.
And I think people have just gotten used to be able to pick up their phone or pick up their readers and just be like, ooh, here's a book I want. I'm going to buy it.
And probably for most people, it's their phone.
Yeah. So I don't want to go to a printing press, even though I could get my books printed cheaper. I don't want to go to one and be like, hey, print me up 500 books and I'll figure out how to sell them if I can just do an Amazon print on demand, because I don't think too many people are going to. I mean, if anyone ever buys my books, I don't think too many people are going to buy the paperbacks. That's the kind of thing these days. Everything has gotten so digital, and it's really, if you're going to do a paperback book, like what I would really do if I was going to go all out on hardcover and paperback editions is I would do special editions, and I would package them with some extra fluff like keychains or something.
Yeah.
And until I get to where I think that would be a viable thing to do, I'm just going to stick with the easy route.
You should package the good guy with a clipboard.
an Elishard themed clipboard.
Yes.
I do love that clipboard.
I think everyone who's read the book loves the clipboard.
I mean, it's just a clipboard, but now I have to make it.
I know.
I think I'm going to have to do a story where it's got like a cute rabbit on it or something. I don't know. So something that only fits one side of her personality.
Right.
Well, so anyway, that's one thing that I noticed at this bookstore. That's actually the biggest thing I wanted to talk about. I just wanted to kind of put it out there that book sizes are getting a bit weird, and I'm not sure why.
Yeah.
I don't know if this information helps anyone with writing or not, but I mean, we're just here to talk about
I mean, I
books and
think
things.
the takeaway here. Let's summarize and let's recontextualize here. I mean, I think that the thing that a reader or a writer can learn is that, number one, businesses are trying new book sizes to see if they're more convenient for you, the reader. Number two, you as the writer nowadays have more flexibility in the size of your book, its aspect ratio, and even its font size if you're doing printing with Amazon. So, I think the point to learn is that don't just take all the defaults from Amazon. If you're working with Amazon for your printing, kind of think about it and see what's going on and be prepared to change it because maybe it needs to be changed.
Yeah, and I did learn a couple of other things while I was at this bookstore. For one thing, I saw enough book covers that were like, I don't want to say bad, but like,
yeah,
kind of like how I have a purposefully bad cover on my book.
Yeah,
I think there were several that I saw like that were worse than mine, and so I was just like, wait, this one's a bestseller. Maybe I'm overthinking this book cover thing after all.
Maybe. Tell me more.
I mean, there isn't much more to it. Like I saw one that was almost identical to what I had. It was just like one face drawn with two colors in a circle. And I was just like, oh, even mine looks better than this. And I drew it myself, and I have the art skill of a 5-year-old with a pack of crayons. But, I guess...
A pack of half-eaten crayons.
Yeah. But I guess some people are just like, well, maybe this look works for some people.
Maybe it works. I don't know. I mean, I guess we don't know how much of these books are selling at Books A Million, right?
Well, there were enough copies of this one giant hardcover thing that was on display that I was looking at it, and then I opened it up. I was like, oh yeah, this book is actually sold. Not this particular one wasn't a bestseller, but people have bought it. It's prominently displayed in a bookstore as well on a table that.
Oh yeah, I mean, if it's been prominently displayed in the bookstore, it's there for a reason. Either the bookstore is taking money to display it prominently, or it's selling a lot. And usually it's selling a lot because almost nobody is willing to pay for, extensive, or not extensive, but like prominent placement in a bookstore. Like that's just not. I don't think there's much of a market for that. I think that's a little bit more organic, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, and as much as I would love to have my own personal Paul Kidby doing the art for my books, it doesn't seem as feasible in a world where there's so many books out there that you're not going to make a return on that investment. Like go to Paul Kidby and ask him for a cover, and after the first 4 zeros, you go ahead and tell me if you think you're going to make that money back.
Well, I mean, how do you spell Paul Kidby?
It's Paul Kirby with a D instead of an R.
Okay.
And since Paul Kirby once worked for the CIA, I wonder if they're the same person.
He even advertises himself as Terry Pratchett, artist, illustrator, and sculptor.
Yeah, that is what he is most famous for, as far as I know.
No, but I mean, like on his website, that's how he says that's how he says what he is.
Yeah, he still does a bunch of Discworld stuff too. He's a really, really good. He's one of my favorite artists for sure.
Yeah,
and not just because of his association with Terry Pratchett. Like his work is the reason that I mean. Okay, so the reason I read Terry Pratchett is because of the Discworld video game for PlayStation.
Right.
And the first book I bought did not have his art on it. It was a copy of Eric. That was the first Terry Pratchett book that I read. I think it was the 4th or 5th Rincewind novel.
Oh, I'm going to have to link to this Paul Kidby site because people are going to want to see this. This is beautiful.
Right? He's amazing. Like
he is amazing.
I don't think
Holy cow.
I don't think there's a single artist cover.
Oh my god!
I'm
looking at his 2010 cover for Color of Magic.
Yeah. That's one of his best ones. Light Fantastic and Color of Magic are my 2 favorites.
Wow. Okay. Cool. Yeah, we'll put a link in the description for this because people need to see this. Whew.
Like he is seriously the best book cover artist that I can think of. And I'm including like all the manga that I know and all the Japanese books that I know.
Oh, I mean, like, it's a totally different medium.
It
right?
is, but I seriously, like, for as much as I would love to have an anime or manga style cover for my books, if I was given the option between an amazing manga artist or Paul Kidby, I'm going with Kidby.
Oh yeah, holy cow! I hadn't seen any of his art in a long time, so I was, kind of like, I didn't remember how good it was, but like, whoa, jeez.
The Art of Discworld, Paul Kidby, great hardcover.
Yeah, beautiful.
And The Last Hero is actually, it's a really good and probably underrated Pratchett book because I don't know how many people that are Pratchett fans have actually read it. I mean, obviously the hardcore ones have read pretty much everything.
Sure.
But, like, there's enough people that read his books that probably found a lot of his books in passing in paperback and read them and loved them and never even knew about this one. Because The Last Hero doesn't really come up. I don't even know if you can download it digitally because it's got pictures in it.
Yeah.
And I never really bothered checking. But it is full of great artwork and it is a great story. It kind of follows up interesting times where it's got Cohen the Barbarian. It's a Rincewind novel, so it's Rincewind falling into a situation where he has to put his life on the line even though he's a coward. This one's actually a great premise for like it's one of my favorite ways that Rincewind ever got involved in something. The wizards basically come to him and say, technically you didn't do this, and that means that we have to expel you from Unseen University. And then they're like, but I've been here forever. And he goes, how can you just kick me out? They're like, well, I mean, this is our hands are tied. And then they start saying things like, unless, of course, you were to contribute some great service in the cause of magic, hint, hint. And he's like, well, I may have saved the world 4 or 5 times. They're like, yeah, but did anyone see you do it? And he's like, well, yeah, actually. Like, yeah, but does anyone in this room remember that? No, we don't remember that. So if you want to contribute, and then he's like, okay, fine. What do you want me to do?
Yeah.
It's a really good book. He goes to the Discworld moon on that one.
Oh, nice. That sounds excellent.
Yeah, it's a very good book, and it's just chock full of great Paul Kidby art. So I fully recommend that. This has just turned into a Terry Pratchett recommendation.
I'm all right with
episode.
that. I'm pro Terry Pratchett recommendations.
Well, you'll never get a higher.
And the audience is too, because if they're not, they should leave.
Be gone, foul fiend.
You're not a true Wordy Pair fan. He said, addressing the null set.
You hear that, Ramon? Beat it. But I've read all of Terry Pratchett. Shut up, you.
Quiet. Yeah, but what Pratchett have you read lately? And who saw you do it?
I literally just reread all of it.
Yeah, but who saw you?
Do people watch other people read? That's my new stalker webpage. I'm going to create a webpage about this. Watching people read.
You could just live stream a webcam of just you reading a book. It's worth a try.
Should I have elevator music playing? Like
No. Just silence and the turning of pages. And you can glance at the chat occasionally, and they can ask you a question.
That would be. I'll call it the world's strangest stalker ASMR.
Yeah. Well, no. I mean, it could just be you reading a book and answering questions every once in a while, and just stream that. I don't know. Someone's probably tried it.
No. I read the book and come up with questions about the book in my head, but I don't read the book out loud. I just answer the question.
Well, no,
without
I'm not saying
context.
read the book out loud. That would violate copyright. You need to license it for that. No, you just read the book, and then if people ask you questions, you answer in your own words questions about the book or whatever. There's a lot of weird audiences for things like that, where it's just like I've heard stories about, like, what do they call it? I don't even know what they call it, but it's basically like a bunch of people writing on Zoom with each other, but they don't talk. They just work. And it's just there basically to provide the environment of seeing other people working near you. Like, this is a real thing.
That is the most first world thing I have ever heard.
I know, right? It's terrifyingly so. But at the same time, like, maybe there's an audience for...
Well, I mean,
hey,
I
I'm gonna read
understand
this
it. I
book.
bet there are people that feel more comfortable working with like other people around, so I get that. Like,
Yeah.
I'm exactly the opposite, which is why I'm kind of like, ugh. But
Which is why I live at the bottom of the ocean.
yeah, pretty much, yeah. I actively avoid taking any job where I have to interact with customers. I've always done like stocking and warehouse work,
Yeah.
things like that. I don't even do comic books because you usually have to work with another person.
Right, right.
I mean, that's probably the number one reason I don't have good book covers. I just don't feel like dealing with another person to do it. Like, occasionally I try to coax my brother into like, hey, be a regular book cover guy and I'll give you money, but I think he has other
Okay,
things
so
he wants
it's
to work
very
on.
funny that you mentioned this just today I was hanging around on Twitter and like an author followed me, just some random, not random. I'm not going to name names because maybe they don't want to be discussed on this tiny little podcast. But basically, there was an author that followed me, and then I followed them back, and then they said, hey, do you self-publish? Do you blah 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 blah? Do you do your own marketing? I'm like, I
Did
kinda
they
do
have
this and that.
GFX designer in their description?
I don't think so. No.
Okay, just checking.
No. They're an actual author, and I looked up their books on Amazon, and they're a romance author, but they're ranked like one of their books that I found was ranked like 250 or something in romance. So like they're decent quality author for romance, which is not my field, but at the same time it is a big field and I don't want to look down on it. But like, yeah, this author was like, oh yeah, I work with this group and give them a DM. And so I got into this DM conversation with like basically a literary agent, or maybe they're more like a publicist at this point because they're not like trying to take my book and give it to a publishing company, but they're trying to get some sales of the book. And I don't know, it's one of those things where it's like I've never tried this before, having an outside person try to help me sell my book, and so like I'm just like I'm considering it, but at the same time I'm very like I don't know, is this is this what I need to do? Does this work? I don't know. So it's just funny that this came up at the same time that we're talking about this today.
Well, I would say the way that you fell into it is probably a good way to give it a try. I've tried it other ways and just decided that I really don't like shopping around for people to help me with this stuff.
Yeah.
So I mean, if that had happened with me, I'd have been like, yeah, sure, I'll give it a try. Why not? Obviously, you do your due diligence and just check what other people there have done. But if it's a group that does this regularly, you're probably fine.
Yeah. Well.
Or if it's like a group of people that work together on these kind of things.
In speaking with this this book promoter, they mentioned two names, and one of the name was the person that referred me, and the other person name was another romance author. Lower ranked, but 250 on Amazon is not bad.
Well, I mean, for romance, 100,000 is not bad.
Right.
How many romance authors are there? Like 7,452,000.
750 million per day.
One.
Yeah, book promoting is difficult and possibly expensive. I just don't know.
Look, I have to be completely honest. It's like if you're doing it all yourself, it's one of the hardest things there is. That's why I have no intention of ever being any good at it, because I love writing, but I do not. I don't work well. I don't want to say I don't work well with others. I don't want to work with others in most cases, and when I do, the few times I did, it was on my initiative, and I always made a mistake, and so I was just oh, I picked the wrong person to work with. So
Right. Well, I am sorry. Jeez.
But no. I mean, especially if you can make that work out, we could use the expertise to talk about things, because that's what we do here.
We could.
So
that is not a bad idea.
Yeah, so if you could learn the ropes of that, and you'd have advice to give other people, do it.
I might work with him for a couple of months and see how things go and see what happens. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I wasn't even successful in finding artists for book covers, so
well, like,
I would not be good at this.
It's one of those things that takes it just takes a lot more time than you would expect. Like, for instance, number one, you can look you can base it's hard to look for the way that Google and like modern search engines work, it's very hard to actually like look for a book cover generator, because what Google does is it gives you the top 10 results over and over and over again.
Yeah, you
right?
end up with books.
There's some guy that's really famous for book covers, but it gives you one entry in the Google search is his main page, and then his about page is like halfway of a page down, and then halfway down a page again you get his about page, and then halfway down from that you get his examples page, and you just keep getting flooded by links to the same website, and you're like, I want variety, not the thing that that happens to have the most traffic,
Yeah. I think I think that just about covers everything that I really wanted to point out at that bookstore. I do want to say again that like half the store was a toy store. I feel like it was a better one than Barnes and Noble. I mean, everything there was kind of set up with pop culture stuff. So you had a Godzilla table, and if there were any books on Godzilla in the store, they had them displayed on the Godzilla table. Like there was a Godzilla versus Kong versus DC Universe comic book that was up there. There were a bunch of little Godzilla toys. There were different toys than I saw at Barnes and Noble.
Yeah.
So it's also a variety by comparison. They didn't have as many of the science toys that Barnes and Noble had.
Okay, interesting.
But they did have a lot more. There was a Hello Kitty table. There was a horror table that was chock full of...
So they did themes more than... Okay, because like it's been a little while since I've actually been in a Barnes and Noble, but their toy section always seemed pretty unfocused to me.
It's a little more. Theirs is a little more geared towards kids, whereas the Books A Million one was geared more towards people wanting collectibles. And I think that that's probably. I don't want to say that's a better market, but it appeals to me more because I'm old.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like there were some really really cool Lovecraft collectibles. They had this giant ceramic box of with like Cthulhu's face on it, a little storage box.
Yeah.
Kind of a treasure chest looking thing.
Oh, I see. That's kind of neat.
All sorts of fun notebooks. They had Godzilla notebooks and manga notebooks.
What do you put in that chest? Like your tax returns?
I maybe an IRS agent if it'll hold them.
I mean, it obviously can't hold the IRS agent, but
you're not trying hard enough. That's the problem.
Like communicate. Well, that's fair. I have not applied enough force. People are like trees. They're 80% air. That's water. Shut up.
Yeah, there was a movie about that. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. We can make this work. Yeah,
exactly. Honey, I Compressed the Kids is a different movie.
It's like that scene in The Simpsons. We'll take the spruce goose. Get in.
Spruce moose.
Oh, yeah, it was the...
I said get in, and he pulls a gun. Beautiful. Old school Simpsons.
Oh, I heard a great reference to one of them earlier today. I think it was someone was talking about the episode where Homer's brother gives him a bunch of money to design a car and it bankrupts him.
Yes.
I remember those old episodes. I think I stopped watching in like the early 90s, so I don't really know much past that.
I watched The Simpsons through the 90s, and then in the 2000s I fell off the truck, which was fine because I picked up an episode here or there, and they were of much lower quality.
Yeah, I mean, I thought they were lower quality even through the mid 90s. I was just like, this isn't as funny as it used to be.
Yeah,
it kind of there's kind of like little changes that sometimes you don't notice. Like I never noticed before. I saw a picture recently, a side by side comparison of the original Family Guy versus the current Family Guy, Peter Griffin, where in the first picture he's bright-eyed and happy and smiling, and it says all the things about his character in the first couple seasons, where it's like he actually cares about his family, he's actually a family man, he's not depressed all the time. And then the modern Peter Griffin, he's always got his eyes half closed and he's always frowning. And everything he says basically hating his family, and he's always depressed, and he's always a negative person, and he always puts himself first. And it's like, oh, that is kind of true. I wonder what happened at
well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because there was a video I saw months and months and months ago about Homer Simpson specifically, and how he went from being generic being a generally good guy with kind of not very intelligent, but generally a good and like good guy and loving parent and stuff like that, to like just like an butt of jokes, absurdly idiotic person kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was an interesting video because like you don't really notice it because it happens kind of slowly, but when you get all of the little like clips and points lined up in chronological order and thrown at you all at once, it's like, oh wow, there really is a big change here. So,
well, I definitely noticed towards the later 90s that his relationship with Ned Flanders changed. It used to be like he would hold a conversation with him, and then he would always have something disdainful to say as he walked away. And then there were a lot of episodes where they were on super friendly terms, and it's like, Homer doesn't like this guy. Don't lie to me.
Well, there was that whole episode where like Homer and Ned Flanders became really good friends. Like that was a fairly early episode still.
Yeah, that was one of them ones that was it was all for comedy effect, and then Homer goes back to not liking him after that.
Right. I don't mean to be a suspicious Aloysius, but did you steal my air conditioner? Oh, I love that. Oh, so good.
I like some of the long-running story arcs in it, but I also think that some of them were silly. Like,
yeah,
I didn't understand the whole thing about Ned Flanders' wife dying. It's like I don't care about this. It was
a gigantic like media thing.
Yeah,
because they were like, because they literally advertised that episode of The Simpsons for like several months before it came out. They're like, one of the members of the Simpsons cast, or of the Simpsons characters dies.
Think of how much trouble they could have saved if they had just made it a poo.
I know they would have really saved themselves some time there, but
and think about how much more I would care about The Simpsons if they still had a poo.
That's also true. Yeah.
How could they get rid of such a beloved character? Wait, did
he was known as the fifth Beatle.
Oh man, one of my favorite episodes. Okay, now we're talking about The Simpsons. I don't even care anymore.
That's fine.
One of my favorite episodes.
We'll close the episode out after we talk about The Simpsons.
Yeah, one of my favorites was the B Sharps episode.
Where
it's like every once in a while you learn something about Homer's past, and it's just like, what? he was in a barbershop quartet. And then the people he was in the quartet with, it's like he knows these random Simpsons characters way better than we all thought he did.
Yeah.
Like wasn't what's the guy with the skinny guy with the black hair at the bar that
Lenny?
Lenny. No, wait. No, Lenny's the cop, isn't he?
No. Lenny and Carl are his two.
Okay, yeah, Lenny was the one I'm thinking of with the green shirt.
I think so.
Yeah, slicked back hair, kind of.
I think so.
Rocking a little bit of a mullet.
Without looking it up, I could be wrong, but
yeah. So who was the fourth member? It was Lenny.
I don't remember.
I think it was Lenny.
It's been so long since.
Wasn't it Mo or was it Apu? It was.
I mean, I'm gonna go look it up.
Yeah. Well, I guess we're obligated to now.
Barbershop Quartet.
I mean, obviously it was a minority since I can't remember them.
5th season. Let's see. He, Principal Skinner, Barney Gumble, and Apu recorded a Barbershop Quartet album in 1985. So Lenny's not in the band.
It was Principal Skinner that I was trying to remember, and for some reason I called Barney Carl because I was thinking of Carl from Aqua Teen Hunger Force. Oh man, it's a little. It's just nostalgic enough that I would like to go back and watch like 3 or 4 old Simpsons episodes, but I probably wouldn't get through much more than that. It's amazing that like for as much as I used to love The Simpsons, it's one of them things where it's like I'm over that. I'm done with it. I don't need to go back to it.
I mean, those old episodes are still like really funny. Like they are massive collections of extremely dense jokes, and they're worth looking at for the purposes of like understanding just how densely you can pack jokes into a scene, Yeah,
and for as good as they were, there's a couple of them that I wouldn't want to go back and revisit.
Sure.
Like I never really cared for the one where everyone where everyone was angry at Bart for cutting off Jebediah Springfield's head. That episode always kind of bored me. I felt it was taken more seriously and wasn't as funny as a lot of the other episodes.
Sure, that's of course, but like any TV show is going to have the occasional off episode. The first 10 to 12 seasons of The Simpsons were pretty solid.
Yeah, I'd say so. Honestly, if I was to compare any specific anime to The Simpsons, funnily enough, I think I'd have to give it to Gintama. And my reason for that is just because they did the whole thing where it's like, we're packing as many jokes into every scene as we possibly can. And they too did have the occasional serious episode, a little more serious than The Simpsons would take it, and a little more of a story arc than The Simpsons would have ran with, but it was usually 3 episodes long, and then they got back to every episode being a comedy show.
Right.
But for the life of me, like, just in the feel of the show in terms of comedy and what they did with it, it may seem weird to make that comparison, but I think Gintama might be the closest to The Simpsons. And I'm including, like, Nichijou and Azumanga Daioh in this.
Well, like, Nichijou and Azumanga Daioh were, like, very short-lived things, too. Like, Gintama went on forever as well. Might even still be going on, for all I know.
I think it finally did end, but it got up into, like, the 300 or so episodes, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it was kind of ridiculous. And it had a bunch of hiatuses, too, so...
Yeah. I stopped at episode 100, and, it was almost 20 years ago, I think, that it started, so it's been around for a while. It feels like a newer show, too.
It does, but that's because we haven't been watching as many, like, sitcom comedy cartoons in the last 20 years.
Yeah, not too many have been made, really. It's a failing on the part of a lot of people in media these days. The art of comedy seems to have slipped by the wayside. Comedy movies...
Well, it's still there. It's just in a different form these days.
Yeah.
Like that kind of... I mean, like, that kind of...
Fast-paced joke-telling in the style of The Naked Gun. That's gone. That is almost completely gone from media.
Which is a shame, because those are fun. And they're not just fun, but they also show that the creators were very, very, very clever.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy to tell a joke. It's very easy to tell 2 jokes. But what's difficult to do is to tell a joke that inside that joke is another joke, and inside that joke is another joke, which is next to another joke at the same time that joke is also being told.
That opens up 5 other jokes down the road.
Right. And The Simpsons managed to do that every once in a while, and it was...
Over the course of decades.
Well, I mean, over the course of a decade, they did it. They hit the jackpot.
Yeah.
A decent number of times, and then after that, they kind of... they've changed too, I'm sure. Not that I've seen too much Simpsons since then.
Yeah, I mean, they were still good as far as I heard from people for a long time, and I think it's only recently where I started hearing people saying that it's just not The Simpsons anymore.
Well, there was a lull. There was a big lull, like, in the early 2000s where, like, it just wasn't funny anymore.
Yeah, no, I feel like they kind of capped off at the release of the Simpsons theatrical movie, and that was basically where you could stop and be done with it.
Yeah, I mean, like, I stopped watching The Simpsons regularly way before that.
Yeah, me too, but I did go to see that movie, and it's just like...
And I heard it like, came back, and I don't know. I mean, it's such an old show at this point. Like, it's at some point they're going to run out of... They're just not... Someone's going to want to retire, you know?
Yeah. Well, Matt Groening is, 742 years old?
743.
Oh, okay. Yeah, just had a birthday.
Yeah. Happy birthday, Matt.
That was another favorite episode of mine. The episode where they opened up the door to Matt Groening's office.
Yeah, and he just got whiskey and a gun and he yells, "Get out of my office." Oh, good stuff.
I'd say it was a pretty good career run to have done that and Futurama, though. It's a pretty impressive fellow.
Yeah, I mean, he's impressive. Mike Judge is impressive, too.
Yeah. God, what was it Mike Judge did?
What do you mean?
He did something, some kind of animation thing recently.
Oh.
Well,
I don't know.
Recently could have been 5 years ago for all I know. I know a while ago, like probably 10 or 15 years ago, somewhere in that area, he did an animation show with, what was the name of the guy that did the genre animation, the black and white stick figures?
Hertzfeld.
Don Hertzfeld. Him and Don Hertzfeld did a kind of cross-country animation show that was kind of cool.
That's nice. I didn't know about that. I'll have to check that out.
I thought, weren't you there with us? No.
Oh, you mean that one? The one that happened 15, 20 years ago?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was Mike Judge and Don Hertzfeld. They were presenting the...
Yes, but like the way that you announced it was like, oh, this was a recent thing that happened in the last 6 years. It's been way longer than that.
Yeah, my sense of time is just gone because I haven't seen that much lately. If there's nothing filling in the space from the time I see something till beyond, like the lack of media kind of changes my perception of time.
Sure. No, I just remember that Mike Judge thing. That was the first time I saw the Mike Judge pencil test animations.
Film. Paprika.
So good.
Yeah, those were pretty good.
They were quite amazing. All right, we are officially off in Tangent Town, so maybe we should call it an episode.
Yeah, this was definitely a bit more of a talking bout.
Yeah,
a bout of talking, if you will.
Well, we stayed on the topic for like about an hour, and then we were
40 minutes. We hit 40 minutes exactly.
Was that it?
I was looking at the clock right when we started to veer.
Well, that's fair. I mean, I thought we veered a little later than that because I was looking at the clock too because I got nothing else to look at. But anyway. Okay, well, this is our bookstores / random topics episode, I guess. I have no idea what I'm going to title this thing.
I'm sure you'll come up with something.
Yeah, I'll figure it out.
Yeah, I guess we can put this well, because we keep going back to movies and things occasionally.
Yeah.
So we used to do that thing where we would record us. I don't want to call it reviewing a movie, but I would go see a bad movie and then I would tell you about it, and it was usually pretty fun to do because you were calling them half-blind reviews.
Well, yeah,
and
we're still calling them that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. We did one, didn't we?
We just did one.
Yeah. So we're gonna do that again, but with a movie.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, I'm gonna go see Alien Romulus,
but not in Romulus.
Was it? Wait, is it Alien Romulus? What's it called? Is it?
It's in Romulus. I'm just saying you shouldn't go to a theater in Romulus.
Yeah, nobody should ever go to a theater in Romulus.
No,
I'm actually going to one in Canton.
There you go.
Which is another place you shouldn't go, but we're kind of stretching thin on theaters at this point. And I have a very good reason for going there. The theater I wanted to go to doesn't have hot pretzels anymore.
Oh, well, screw them.
And if I'm going to spend $30 to see a movie, it's going to be with hot pretzels, not popcorn.
$30? Jeez.
Yeah, it's like $10 for... Oh, okay, it's probably more than that. It's probably $14 to see the movie now. And it's probably $8 for the pretzels. And which I usually don't, but if I get a drink with them, I usually look and say, is there a ton of salt on those pretzels? Okay, I'm going to need a drink. And that's what brings it up to about $30. So I don't go to the movies that much anymore. Like, I used to go almost once a month before COVID.
Yeah.
And I have been to the theater twice in the past 6 years. And both times it was for a Godzilla movie.
Well, I mean, that's a reasonable reason to go.
For one of them, yes. For the other, not so much. Like, Godzilla Minus Zero was definitely...
You gotta know. You have to know.
Yeah. Godzilla vs. Kong was not theater worthy.
Yeah, fair enough.
But yeah, I'm going to see the new Alien movie, and we'll do a half-blind review of that, and hopefully it'll be funny like the other ones were. But the problem is, it's usually the bad ones. Now, I have heard that half of this movie is good, and then it kind of dies out at the end, which might mean it's not really funny to really poke fun at it as much. But
sure, but
it might still be an interesting thing to look at writing-wise.
My understanding is that the writing is really, really bad. And it's full of member berries. That's all I know.
Yeah, well, on the other hand, when I heard everyone saying this one is actually good, part of me is thinking, good compared to what? Because I've seen several movies now that people are like, oh, finally, Hollywood's done a good movie again. And then I watch it, it's like, no, this is very mediocre, and you're just calling it good because you've been starved for good movies.
Yeah, did you see Deadpool and Wolverine?
No, I have zero interest in seeing Deadpool.
I actually saw it. My family went out.
Yeah, you were telling me it was actually not too bad.
It wasn't bad and it wasn't good. It got maybe like 3 or 4 laughs out of me through the whole movie, which isn't very good for a comedy movie.
Yeah.
And like the plot was complete nonsense, but it was self-referentially known as nonsense. So it's like, I mean, a good writer can write a plot that is self-referential, fourth wall breaking, and nonsensical. But if that is all he can write, and if that is the only reason why the plot is good, is because it is because it can't possibly have a problem, because by definition it doesn't have a problem. You know what I mean? Like, we define the universe to only have the things in it that we want when we want them. You know, that's not a sign of good writing necessarily. And it can be consistent because literally nothing is consistent. But like that's damning with faint praise at best.
Yeah, I had a feeling it might be something like that, because that was another one I was hearing good things about, and I was suspicious. I was. I mean,
it grossed over $1 billion, so like,
well,
you know,
well, sure, but
it made
mean,
money.
I'm talking about my opinion, not everyone
Sure.
else's. And a lot of movies made money that probably wouldn't have if people had known going in. I'm sure that people actually liked Deadpool though, because I didn't hear
people like Deadpool in general.
Yeah.
I mean, Ryan Reynolds is pretty good at you know, goofy advertising and kind of, you know, being silly, and people like that.
I will say that I didn't mind the first Deadpool movie. I didn't have any interest in seeing the second one, because while I didn't think the first Deadpool movie was necessarily bad, and I did think it was pretty funny in a lot of places,
right?
It wasn't my kind of movie, so I didn't go see the second one.
Yeah, I think I saw both of them, and I don't remember anything about them except that at one point someone does the hero landing and someone makes a joke about it. That's literally all I remember from those two movies.
I vaguely remember in the first movie that he kept calling the bad guy Francis, and he wrote his name using the corpses of the people that were trying to kill him in one scene, which I thought was a little amusing,
remember that,
but not overly funny.
Oh, that may have happened, sure. That's how unmemorable those movies are.
Yeah, and honestly, there's a lot of movies in the early Marvel movie run that people hated that I still think were better quality than everything that came after Endgame. Like, everyone really hated the second Thor movie, and I was like, it had a lot of fun to it. It had a lot of things that I could enjoy, even if it, you know, story-wise wasn't all that great.
It's kind of garbagey. Yeah.
And it really was that first 10-year run that I really enjoyed, and even as it got closer to the end of it, like, I watched the first half of that last two movies, the Infinity Gauntlet ones.
Yeah.
I watched the first one, and I was like, this is probably peak, and I couldn't bring myself to watch Endgame until 5 years later.
Yeah.
4 or 5, it was a couple of years later. I was just like, I don't care, because this is peak, and I'm going to watch the other one, and even if it's good, it's not going to be as good. And I finally did watch it, and I was like, I was right. It closes the story out nicely. I don't mind it, but there was nothing in it that wasn't there before, and I didn't need this. And if I'm being completely honest about it, everyone loves those two movies to death, but they don't stand alone very well without having seen all the movies that came before them, which is why I think a lot of the movies that came before those two were actually better. I think.
Well, that's why I never watched any of them. I saw Iron Man, and I never saw any of the other Marvel MCU movies. And so, like, when people are like, "Oh man, Avengers is so great," I'm like, "Yeah, but I can't watch it because I won't understand it."
I mean, if you watched Iron Man,
I'm disincentivized from watching it.
Yeah, it's kind of where I stood on it. Like, I told people for years, if you watched Iron Man, then the only reason to watch the other movies is just because they have characters you want to see. Like, that's why I watched them. I wanted to see the Thor movies, which unfortunately ended up being the weakest of the bunch.
Yeah.
But I liked the first one. The second one, yeah, it had its problems. I still had fun with it. I didn't care for the last two very much. Everyone seemed to like Ragnarok. To me, that's where it started to turn into.
Well, we did a half blind on Love and Thunder.
Oh yeah, that movie was atrocious. But yeah, if you saw Iron Man, you basically had the script for every other movie that came after that. And the only other one that I would recommend outside of that was the first Avengers movie. But even though that one does a better job of standing on its own than the Endgame couple.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, to be fair, I've never been a comic book guy, so like, this stuff is all just like, oh, it's a movie.
I mean, neither
it
have
doesn't
I.
hold any particular.
Like to give you an example of how weird my getting into these movies was, I absolutely hate Spider-Man as a character, and that's all I really like about Spider-Man was like the very first Spider-Man movie that Sam Raimi did back in like 2000. Everything else. The other, so I like.
Not interested.
Yeah. I mean, I don't like the character, so he never really appealed to me. I thought the first movie was pretty funny and entertaining and had good action. Everything after that started to get a bit. I don't know. They seem to change Peter Parker's character a lot from movie to movie.
Yeah.
And then they really changed it once he got into the official Marvel universe with like Spider-Man Homecoming and everything, where he's walking around referring to Tony Stark as Mr. Stark and everything, and it's just like, you're Spider-Man, you don't owe this guy anything. And I mean, technically he did in those movies because Tony Stark gave him a bunch of cool gear, but it's like, no, Peter Parker in the comic books, from everything I remember, he did a lot of things on his own. Like he built his own web slinging nonsense. He would go and find help from people, but he had a lot of stuff given to him in the Marvel universe just so they could quickly bring him into the fold. And I felt that came at the expense of his character because I didn't really see anything in him at that point.
Yeah, if everything he has been given to him, then there's not much to the character,
Yeah, I mean, there were things that kind of sort of developed him, but every movie he was in, it was like he was like, "Ooh, Mr. Stark, help me with a thing. Ooh, Doctor Strange, help me with a thing," and something gets screwed up, usually his fault, and then he has to go through some kind of tragedy to fix it.
Yeah. I mean, I always thought it was a bad idea to make it so that he didn't have to, like... I always thought the idea of him being, like, actually kind of like a chemical genius, and he comes up with, this the web solution himself, and he manufactures it himself, and, I always thought that aspect of, old Spider-Man was kind of... It gave the character a little bit more like, oh, he's not just some guy. He saw an opportunity, and he was both intelligent enough and lucky enough that he could capitalize on it in that particular way. Because, like, imagine Spider-Man without the webs.
Yeah, and they did go back to that, I think, because there were multiple Spider-Man runs. They had they did have one run where he actually did build his own web slinging tools.
Oh, okay. Good.
I think in the big crossover one they did with all three Spider-Mans, they kind of made fun of that somewhere, but
okay, fair enough.
It's I think two of them had web shooting thingies, and the first Spider-Man movie guy could actually fire webs, and
isn't that him?
I think they made a joke about it being disgusting. Yeah, it was Tobey Maguire.
Yeah, it is kind of disgusting when you think about it.
But I don't know.
At least this comes out of my wrists.
Yeah. I don't know. It's like comic books were never really my thing. There were brief periods where I would get in and out of them. Like I read some of the Jurassic Park comics. I read the Duckman comic for a while.
Okay.
I read Mad Magazine, if you count that. That was probably my longest run of reading anything comic book wise. And then for a very short time, I had a pull service at a comic book shop where I was reading the overseas comics that Viz was bringing over here. They were taking the full-length mangas that had like 4 comics at a time in them, and they were publishing them as the floppy comics in one-issue sets of each of those 4.
Okay.
So I was reading Ranma 1/2, Oh My Goddess, and I can't even remember what the other one was because I read so few of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was... And I ended up giving a box of those away, so I basically only ever read enough of them to fill one cardboard box.
That's still a pretty decent amount of comic books, but yeah.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't be able to...
I read a bunch of Marvel Zombies, and not much else.
Well, there was one Ghost Rider run that I read. It was the Danny Ketch run, and that was about it. And I don't think I read all of it. I think I had I read one graphic novel of it, or a collection thing. That was it.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, comic books are still fine. I prefer books, and that's why we're here, talking about writing and things. So comic books and even movies fit that bill, so we'll have to cover all of that. Good times. I think we
enough.
talked about enough nonsense now. What do you think?
Yeah, okay, fair enough. We'll call this an episode. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. As always, I'm Rudy.
And as sometimes, I'm Justin.
And we are out. Wordy Pair Podcast. See y'all next time.
Thanks for listening to the Wordy Pair Podcast. Our passion is all things writing, world building, and getting into the weird and wonderful world of fiction. We hope you enjoyed our unique takes. If you did, make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe to get your weekly dose of writing weirdness. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, hit us up on Twitter. For Rudy, it's @Rudolph_Cone. And for Justin, @Ninja Mouse Chew. See you next time on the Wordy Pair Podcast.